also have our team members, Kai and Jessica with us. We are all current applicants this app cycle, I'll say, because there's two different like app platforms. We'll get into that. And we really appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us for this step 2 webinar where we're going to share a bit of our study practices and just tips and tricks to help you do your best on step 2 because it's a big one.
It is. It is.
So Jessica's going to start us off.
Okay, so hi everyone. Again, thank you for coming. So like I said, my name is Jessica. I'm a 4th year at SGU. So currently still in my electives, I still have like 2 more electives to finish and then should be done with everything by December. But yeah, so I'm really excited. I'm applying for general surgery. And yeah, so I guess we can go to the next slide. If at any point you have any questions, please, or you're not clear on something, you can interrupt me and ask me about it. So this is pretty much my timeline. So I finished 3rd year in May. My last core was surgery. So that's when I ended. I ended May 3rd. And then on May 4th, that's when I took my surgery shelf. Initially, I had given myself 4 weeks to be able to try to study for dedicated. So my plan was to have the rest of the month of May to have it as a dedicated because I knew I was going to start my first 4th year rotation on June 3rd. So I just wanted to use that time to be able to study for step 2. And you as you are just to make sure, is most of the people in the audience 3rd years? You could just raise your hands or say something. So just I have an idea. Okay, cool. So you'll see throughout yes, okay, cool. So you'll see throughout your your whole 3rd year, as you're taking your shelf, you're really also preparing for step 2. Because it's also about the same concept that you will see coming back during your step 2 rotation. So I knew I didn't need an extended amount of time to be able to study for step 2. I just needed to just have it that time just to be focused, to be able to give my all, go over the materials, go over my CMS forms to be able to study for the exam. But the thing is, I also work, I'm a nurse. So I needed to work because financial aid does not cut it for everything. So I had taken the first 2 weeks to be able to work for a little bit, the first 2 weeks of the month of May, and I was going to try to fit in study in between, but that did not happen. So then the May 15th, that's when I decided to be able to try to study a little bit, but I was also involved in 3 research projects, and all of them were due by the end of the month of May. So I will say to you, whatever you decide your dedicated time to be, just make sure it's fully dedicated time and that you don't have other stuff in between because that can interrupt the dedicated time. At least that's what I found in my case. So what I had to do was actually really start my dedicated time in June when I started my MICU rotation. So I was studying for step 2 while I was in my MICU rotations. I would go home around I would get released from my MICU rotations around 4 p.m., would go home and then study. So here I have a breakdown of what I did. So my forms, so I only did the UWorld assessment 1. I didn't have time to do the other UWorld assessments. And then for forms 9, 10, and 12, I just did those offline. But because I was in my MICU rotation, it would take me the entire week to be able to review the forms. So I was doing about 20 to 30 questions, reviewing those 20 to 30 questions a day. But just also making sure that whatever I was reviewing, I was understanding well because I didn't have time to go back to anything else. You will see, I will have a later, the following slide, you will see I have the resources that I use. So in my case, because I was in the middle of an elective, I did away with UWorld. I only focus on the NBME forms and just make sure that I understood the concepts that were being tested and that they wanted us to know. Because you will have seen those concepts throughout your entire 3rd year. So it's just refreshing some of the stuff, having a second, third, whatever pass on the material, and then understanding it better and how NBMEs want you to see the information, how it's presented to you, and how you're able to, and they want to make sure that you truly understand the concepts that are presented to you, because it's the same things that just come back to you over and over again, but just tested in a different way. So just making sure you have a good grasp of the concepts that they're trying to test you is going to be key for step 2. And here you have a little bit like the rest of the breakdown of like my forms. I did 11, 13, and 14. I did those forms online. So the ones that I did offline, I threw the score there, but I don't know how true that score is because it was offline and it's a calculator that they have. And so those scores, I was just like, those forms I mostly used to be able to solidify the information that I was seeing again, making sure I was really understanding what they wanted me to learn. And then the forms online just gave me a better grasp of where I was at that point. And then the day before my exam, I did the free 120, I did the PDF form, and I got 80% for this. And then July 6th was test day. I got a like in the 250s. And so I would say my dedicated time was about like 4 to 5 week-ish if I were to like add days here and there. We can go to the next slide. So for the resources that I use, you will see I put in pink the two ones, or pink purple, the two major resources that I use, which were the NBME forms and Divine. I cannot stress enough how Divine podcast is a gold mine and will save you. So if you could, like, the biggest thing that I could do if I could go back and do myself the biggest favor would be throughout my clerkships, listen to his podcast for whatever core rotation I'm doing. So if I'm doing peds, just listen to all the peds podcasts he has on, because he will save you so much headache. Like, I'm sure everybody, like, I'm sure Charnice, Noelle, they can relate to that. Divine is, that's all I will say. So, and then yes, I use UWorld, but by the time I reached step 2 dedicated time, I had to ditch UWorld. I didn't have time to do UWorld. The free 120, that's going to give you an idea where you're at for test day. So I would say that towards the end. Boards and Beyond, I just use here and there if there was a concept that I was getting wrong. Like, for example, I knew GI was my weakest area. So I took some time and just listened to a couple of videos on GI just to be able to solidify that, understand where my mistakes, where my gaps were, and to be able to fix those. And then sketchy and picturize here and there, just through one sketch or two that I had forgotten from basic sciences. But how many times did I listen to Divine? So Divine, it was, how long did it take you to get through it? I listened to Divine every day. So during my dedicated, I listened to him every single day, every morning. As I was walking to the hospital, I would listen to it. If like most of his podcasts, I just listened to once, but if there was something like that I was not sure on, or like I forgot about, I probably would re-listen to that specific podcast, but most of them I just listened to it once. And you will see as you're listening to his podcast, he repeats a lot of the information that he said in another one, just to be able to integrate the information and be able to retain it better. But he even has a podcast where he talks about how to listen for them during dedicated, and which ones are the most high yield. So I think Charnice just posted like the ones that you like that are the most high yield ones. Which one is it that the one he has the high risk? Which one is it, guys? High risk factors?
Like risk factors on there. Like there's an OB one because I kept forgetting OB. That was crazy. There's a bunch on there. So hopefully it's helpful for you guys.
Yeah. So Divine, definitely he's a godsend. And yeah, that's pretty much it. But at the end of the day, like the biggest thing I want you guys to remember is that sorry, I don't know if you guys can hear coconuts barking. The biggest thing I want you guys to remember is that you've made it this far. You know what kind of student that you are. Use what you know works for you, and take from even this webinar whatever you know will work for you. Like maybe the things that I did might not be necessarily what works for you, but just see from whatever we are presenting, see what you know will work for you, what kind of experiences that we've had that can help you. But if you need more questions, like if you guys have more questions about that later on, we can talk more about that. But that's pretty much it for me.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Charnice. This is my email and Instagram. We can go to the next slide. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions outside of this. So my timeline was a bit wonky because I finished my course actually in December. So I finished course in December. And I was planning to take step 2 between like December and January because I knew that I was starting electives in February, but that just did not happen. Personal life things, it happened. So while I was doing my electives between February and when did I finish? July, I kept trying to like start studying and it just was not working. Like between like personal stuff and being in electives, I was like, this is just not working. So I waited because I figured that I had time anyway. So I didn't start my dedicated until August 1st. And between August 1st and the time I took my first NBME, I was just like, you know, doing some Anki, doing some questions, nothing crazy. Like I was just like kind of refreshing my memory. On August 12th is when I took my first NBME. I took them way out of order. So I took 12 first. So my baseline was a 216. And I felt okay about that, given that it was 8 months out from the time that I completed clinical rotations. Between my like second and third weeks of studying, I took NBME 11. As you can see, that was not cute at all. I scored a 195. The week after that, I took NBME 13. I did that offline. I was tired of like paying for for the online NBME, so I just did them offline through PDFs. If you guys need PDFs, you can reach out to us as well. So I took 13 offline. I'd used the same score calculator that Jess was talking about. And then I did the old free 120. And then the week after that, I did the new free 120. And then the last one that last NBME that I took was NBME 14. And on that NBME, I scored 237. I didn't do any URL self-assessment. I heard that it was like a confidence crusher and I was like really close to testing and I was like, I'm just not gonna do it. So NBME 14 was the last NBME I took. And then there's also this like score predictor. And it has like all the different like practices and stuff like that. And you can just like plug and chug your numbers. You don't have to take all of those tests. Like you see, I didn't take all of those at all, but you can just plug and chug your numbers. And mine said that my like score on test day would be like 235 plus or minus 5 points. And on test day, I actually scored in the 240s. And in total, that was like about 5+ weeks. So we could go to the next slide and I'll talk about my resources and how I use them. All right. So resources, obviously UWorld was like the best thing for me. After I took that NBME where I scored a 195 and I started freaking out, what I did was I looked at my little score report, saw my like, you know, my deficiencies. There were a lot of them. And I basically like coupled first aid and UWorld together. So if I found that, okay, like cardiovascular is a big issue for me, I literally would spend an entire day or 2 days going through the cardiovascular section of first aid step 2. I would make like little flashcards of high yield things and I would do that on Quizlet. I'll make little flashcards. And then after that, I would supplement with UWorld and I would just do like a block. I would do blocks of 10. I didn't sit down and do like 40 question UWorld blocks. I would do blocks of 10 back to back to back to back, like however many times I had to until I was scoring about like 70-80% on those like mini UWorld blocks. And then it was nice that I was like, while I was revising, I was making flashcards because then the next morning I would be like going through my Quizlet every day, like just, you know, making sure that things stick that way. I stopped using Anki. Anki was taking up too much of my time, and I was just like, I need to focus on what I need to focus on and not what is on like this pre-made Anki deck. So that was UWorld. It was great. I stopped using UWorld like maybe a week and a half out because I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I had to focus on NBMEs. So NBMEs are king. When you're doing your NBME forms, you will see like how they are asking the same questions about certain topics in a bunch of different ways. And once you keep practicing those questions, you will, you know, practice makes perfect. So you'll improve. So NBME forms are wonderful. Obviously, it's better to do the online forms, in my opinion, because I think it like simulates test day more accurately than the PDFs. But I mean, you have to do what you have to do. So if you have to do an offline PDF, that's just as fine. Just make sure that you're within the same time limits, that you're not, you know, looking at your notes, stuff like that. USM first aid step 2. Honestly, so I used first aid for step 1 and it was king. Nobody really talks about first aid for step 2, but honestly, it gathered me all the way together. And I'm so happy that I used it because it was like, it was just a perfect like outline of everything you needed to know on the exam. I felt like that helped me a lot with my knowledge. Quizlet, of course, I use that daily. I just would always like go through my flashcards. USMLE Free 120. I think those PDFs are great. And in my opinion, the questions on the USMLE Free 120, they're more similar to the exam questions in terms of like length, and I think in terms of what's the word, like level, like what is it, like if a question is hard, medium, easy, I think they're on par with the actual like test day questions. Boards and Beyond, I use that here and there. I mostly used it for like epi and biostats, because you know that stuff, like it comes and it goes. So that's what I use Boards and Beyond for. And yeah, Divine Intervention, I put that link in there. Those are like some high yield podcast topics from him. Please check it out. Like literally, if you are like walking in the mornings or working out in the mornings, you can just like put that in, and like he has a lot of gems and he will like save you a lot of time when you're approaching questions. So yeah, that's how I used my resources. We could go to the next slide. So some study tips that I found to be like really helpful for me, starting to study early in the day, you know, like, you know, have your little morning routine and just start studying if time allows. I know some people are working, some people have, you know, you have your own lives, but if you can start studying early in the day, get things done by a decent time, you can enjoy the evening, sleep early, and start all over again. Treat practice exams like the real one. I kind of talked about that already. Make sure that, you know, if you are using offline, that, you know, you're in the same time limits. You're not like talking to your family if they're around. You're, you know, not like looking back in your notes or anything like that. Treat it like it's the real exam day. That's going to help you most. Using your score reports to identify deficiencies. I talked about that. They're actually really helpful. Like you can see the improvement if you really focus on like troubleshooting those areas that that you're deficient in. Don't get bogged down in too many resources. Don't, like, people are trying to use multiple Q banks, I'm using Melman, I'm using First Aid, I'm using Firecracker, I'm using, like, figure out what works for you, figure out what's sticking. If it's not broke, don't fix it, and don't add a bunch of like chaos into it. And practice makes perfect. At a certain point, like reviewing. Too much reviewing is like beating a dead horse. Like just practice and you'll see improvement from there. Next slide. All right, so for test day, take breaks as you see fit. It's a long test. It's 8 blocks, 40 questions each, an hour long each. Like, it's a long day. So, you know, you might have a plan. Oh, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to do the first 3 blocks and then I'm going to take a break. Then I'm going to do the next 3 blocks. Like, you have to listen to yourself, listen to what feels okay, and do that on test day. Okay. So I think for me, I did the first 2 blocks and then I took a break. And in my head, I was like, yeah, I'm going to do 2 more blocks. And I could only take like 1 more block before I could take another break. So yeah, listen to yourself on test day. In terms of eating, like, my therapist actually went through this with me. She told me to eat like high protein snacks, less carbs, to get through that last, like the last push, like the last 2 blocks, to have some caffeine, a little cookie, something like that. Wear comfortable clothes. I don't know. I just, when I'm testing, I need to be comfortable, especially when it's a long day like that. And just pray, exude confidence, and take a moment to breathe. There are going to be times where you are going to be like, your shoulders are going to be up to your ears, your jaw is going to be clenched. Take a moment and breathe. You studied. You can handle questions. So like, just be confident in your studying, be confident in yourself. It will all be okay. So that's all I have.
All right, thanks, Charnice. Next slide, please. So for me, my timeline was kind of similar to Jessica's in that I had some things going on that kind of interrupted the flow of my what would have been just straight dedicated time. I finished in May, and then I immediately took my shelf, and then I took an MBME just without really like just to see like if I took it today, what would happen. And it went okay, but I was like, there's definitely room to go from here. And then I went to the ACOG conference because I'm applying OB and I wanted to network and, you know, just really get into my specialty of choice. And then I came back from that and had about a couple weeks where I was just working on finishing UWorld because I had not completed my first pass of UWorld during clerkships. I know people that did, but I was just kind of taking it rotation by rotation and just focusing on those questions, and whatever was left at the end is what I worked on. So my real dedicated started in June. I did all of the MBMEs 9 through 14, and I also did the free 120, the one from summer of last year. And then my test day was at the end of July. So altogether, it was around 7-8 weeks that I spent. And I would probably have given myself more time. Like if I could have not had the conference, not that I wouldn't have gone, but if I would have had, if the conference would have been earlier, would have been great. So I really could have just committed along with some like personal events that I like had to attend to before I could really focus. That would be great. So as others have already said, limiting distractions to your dedicated time is very key. Along with just not getting distracted day to day while you're doing your work. Next slide, please. Okay. Sorry, just checking the chat. So for resources, I forgot to highlight my key ones, but it was pretty much the NBME forms. I did all of them. I only did them online. like Charnice said, online or offline, it doesn't really matter, whatever works for you. As y'all might recall, I know a couple of you just joined us a little bit late. Jessica had said that when she did some offline, that you can estimate the score, but you can't necessarily guarantee, versus if you do them online, it just makes things easy. It's calculating like what it would be. So I just chose to do them online. And then my other main resource besides the NBMEs was Divine Intervention Podcast. I definitely heavily endorse that. I also added 2 more links to the chat that might be a little bit buried now. Two links that I had found. One was where someone had transcribed a lot of the episodes, like a ton of the episodes that he's done, most of the high yield ones that you would really want to listen to that are probably correlated to the list that Charnice shared. So if you're someone like me who sometimes prefers to read things rather than listen to it, or you just want to read and listen at the same time to really just help it sink in, I found that very helpful when I was listening to the podcast. And then the other link is just a spreadsheet that helps you see like what all the episodes are, kind of what topics they cover. So if you're identifying weaknesses or deficiencies as you're doing your practice exams, then you might want to take a look at that and just be able to see what are all the episodes that he's made, what number are they, how long are they, so you can kind of strategically plan to listen to them when you're studying. I just felt like it made it easier for me because I really like to plan it all out. Like I had a whole little calendar of like, I'm gonna listen to this these days. That's just what was most efficient for me. I also did find the question bank for AMBOSS, for ethics, and for some of the other high yield topics. I think there was like 2 of them. One was like questions you see on every step exam, and another was like not ethics, but something else. If I find the name of it, I'll try to post it in the chat. And I think that was about it. So on to the next. Again, echoing what Charlie said, just practices everything over reviewing. Like Jessica said, like you don't always have time to go back. Like if your dedicated time is short, or if your dedicated time is a little bit longer, like mine was, you can't review everything you learned over the past year in 8 weeks. So just get as many practice questions as you can, because the test is like what, 300 plus questions. So you might as well try and do as many times that as you possibly can, just to familiarize yourself with the material. Simulate test conditions while you're studying, limit distractions, just really like kind of isolate yourself. Like I was living in the library. I was leaving my house at like 7, 8 a.m. and I was coming back at like 6, 7 p.m. And that just was what worked for me, especially when I was doing the NBMEs, because then I had a quiet space, like a little cube, like, you know, those little cubbies where I could really just zone in just as if I was in a prometric site. And then the third just tip I have is just, you know, don't compare yourself to anyone. Sometimes I would study with friends, which was great. But also, you know, everyone has their own approach. So don't freak yourself out thinking that if someone's using a resource that you don't use, or if they're using it differently than you are, that means that you're doing something wrong, because you have passed everything so far. You've been studying successfully. So just keep doing what you're doing. And yeah, on to Kai.
Alrighty, they saved the haphazard studier for the last. All right, my name is Kai. Like Jess, I work as a nurse and full-time as an NP as well. So my studying was very haphazard. I ended my IM sub-I May 31st, and then I started the healthcare leadership elective with all intention of studying during that. I absolutely did not study at all during that time period. But if you need something to study during the healthcare leadership elective at Jersey City, is a great elective to do if you need a bit of study time and still want to get some elective weeks knocked out. So that's a good one to do. I did start studying in July. That was supposed to be my bridge time, dedicated time. So I took a month of bridge because I just wanted a month off, which was supposed to be for a vacation. Instead, it turned into my dedicated time. I did end up going on vacation the first week of that, which meant that I really only had 3 weeks of like full study time, which was completely interrupted by me working and teaching. So don't go with what I did, okay? What I started with at the beginning on the first was I did the AMBOSS step 2 self-assessment to see how in trouble I was before I like started to kind of like map out a plan. And it wasn't so bad. So I was like, okay, I might be able to do this. I did do all of my forms as well online. And basically I would do a form, review the form the next day or like part of the like a day and a half. And then go back to doing another form because again, I had compressed time. So I just kept doing that back to back. And then at the end, I got real pressed for time and I was so tired. So this is why I don't recommend it. That at that point, I really just didn't care anymore. And I was just like, forget it. I'm just going to take this exam. Who really cares? I just need to get a score and just be over with it. So that's why I say, don't do it like how I tried to do it in like a 3-week, 4-week time frame. Give yourself a little bit more time so that you can have breaks unless you absolutely it's necessary that you get it done within 3 weeks, like whatever your timeline requires. But for me, I just didn't want to start any more electives. And I wanted to be done by August. And the reason why we say that is because whatever application you decide to do, ERAS, whatever, it is a beast. And nobody knew how much time it would be required to chase after your letter writers, to get all of the information together, to revise your personal statement 500 billion times is very time consuming. That I really highly recommend that you really try, if you can, based on your timeline, to be done by August to really be able to focus so that when you submit your application in September, you feel good about it. Because a lot of our friends were like rushed and they just didn't really necessarily have the time to revise their application or to have as many people as possible review their application. So I say if you can try to like take June and July to really like study or beforehand, whatever your timeline is. So for me, I did in July in this manner. I took the free 120. I went to Prometric to do the free 120 because I wanted to simulate as much as possible. I think it was like $75 or something like that, or $50. I don't remember. There is a cost to it, but it was well worth it because I was able to simulate the test questions in the environment at the same place that I would be doing. And I found that really helpful. So I did that the Friday, and then I sat for the exam on that Monday. What I did over the weekend in between taking my free 120, I had finished all the MBME forms. What I did was listen to Divine's free 120 podcast, where he goes through each free 120 question and its explanation, and then gives you tips on how not to fall into the trap again if you happen to fall in the trap of the question. That was extremely helpful. I also over the weekend did what Noelle said, the AMBOSS, I think it was the 200. I'll show you my resources, but that as well, the high yield 200 questions was really good. And I was able to score somewhere in the 250s. But again, this was very haphazard and rushed. So if you take the time and solidify the information, you'll be good to go. Here are my resources. So I did all the MBMEs, like I said, online. I didn't use UWorld in my dedicated. I completed UWorld before I started dedicated. So that's what I did during my sub-I, was to complete and finish all of the rest and remaining UWorld forms I had. The AMBOSS, this is the one I was talking about, the 200 concepts that appear in every step 2 exam. That one was really, really helpful. And I did that the weekend before my exam. So that weekend, I think I did like Saturday, and I took the exam on Monday. A lot of those concepts were on the exam, not the exact question, of course, but just reviewing things that you may have forgotten, especially some of like the step 1 concepts that you forgot. And I was like, oh, shoot, I forgot that. Some of that was kind of integrated into the exam as well. And then, like everyone said, Divine Intervention podcast. And then I did go back to Sketchy a bit and kind of review certain things that I had was like, oh, what happened in that Sketchy? And that was really, really helpful because there were a few step 1 concepts that were tested in a different way that you wouldn't think that would be tested. And you're like, oh, shoot. And I kind of was like in my head, okay, what side of that was that on the Sketchy, to kind of like remember what was happening. So I'm glad I kind of reviewed a bit of that as well. I will say on this exam, the questions are questions that we haven't been tested on. Like there is a newer format of questions. I had, I think, 3 blocks where I only had 38 questions because it was the ones that were grouped. What are those questions, y'all? Y'all remember what I'm talking about? Like they were like
They're like
grouped in-
the ads, like
yeah.
it was like biostats kind of questions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you have to like read like this journal article, kind of, and basically answer the questions based off of that. Previously, we had never been tested on that way, and I didn't see any of those in UWorld when we were doing the UWorld blocks. So the only time I really encountered it was, I think, maybe NBME 14 and Free 120, maybe, or on AMBOSS. I don't think you really will see them. Maybe UWorld has updated by now and added these questions, but we did have a good amount. I had 3 blocks of those questions.
And can I just say something?
Yeah.
Sorry. That's another like study tip and test day tip I would say is when you see those questions, personally, skip that. Skip it and then come back to it at the end because they take so long to like read through. The questions are in my opinion, they were like a lot harder to understand. So I just got into the habit of like skipping them and finishing the entire block and then coming back at the end so that I could have like the appropriate amount of time to spend on it.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
Divine will tell you that. And I listened to his like Free 120 and pre kind of how to get ready for step 2. And he said that. And I did exactly that in exam. Like I would see that question, go do the rest. And then if I had 6 minutes left, then I would take the 6 minutes to go back through those because they will take up time and you will sit there and try to figure it out and then miss other questions because you run out of time. Time will not be your friend on this exam. I will say that. Another method they have is the H&P questions. I had 1 block or 2 blocks where 25 to 30 questions out of that entire block was those H&P questions. It was horrible. And I kept saying, okay, I got through that one. All right. And then I would hit the next question. I'd be like, oh, come on again. And I kept doing that.
You're lying.
No, I had a block where it was like 25 questions were just like all the H&P questions.
Yeah, same
So
for me. Same for me. Like I
What?
remember calling Kai, most of my exam was those HMP questions. That, and then I didn't have 3 blocks of the ad, I had 2, but otherwise, most of my exam was the soap note questions.
Oh
Soap
no.
note, soap
Yeah.
note, soap note.
yes,
The
and they
strongest
take
soldiers.
time. Yes. So you need to really be able to get good at just scrolling through, highlighting really quickly the pertinent points, and then look at what they're asking you because they take a little bit of time too. If you're like one that needs to read everything, you have to learn how to quickly read and scroll through it because depending on your exam, you may get a lot of those questions. So that is another point. So my tip, or what I say, Kai's word of the day, that really this is not the time for you to try to learn how to study or develop new study habits. If what you've been doing has brought you thus far, keep doing it, please. Do not try to incorporate anything new. Just try to like enhance it, make it more efficient, because you have to be efficient in studying and you have to be efficient during the exam, because they're not playing fair on this exam, as far as how much information that you have to go through with the question with the same amount of time. So you just have to be really, really, really efficient in what you're doing. And then just have your Rolodex ready to go, because they take you from one extreme to the other with each test question. And then just go be great. That's all I have. Oh, there's some questions. Anything I need to answer?
All right, so yeah, if you guys have questions now, you can either like unmute or you can put it in the chat. I guess
see studying ethics. Ethics, I used the AMBOSS. That AMBOSS bioethics was really good. And then also Divine has an ethics podcast as well. That was good. And then also listen to Divine's tips on how to tackle the stats of step 2. That was really, really good. I listened to that the night before, and that really helped me on a step 2 exam with the biostats questions.
Yeah, I will say ethics was heavily tested on the exam. I feel like every other question on my form, every other question was an ethics question. Like Kai said, using AMBOSS will help you. But yeah, just try to practice them as much as you can. I don't know, that's for me, I don't know that there was like a most ideal way to study.
yeah, I was
this-
like, I
yeah.
was using UWorld questions just to like, you know, get a lot of practice. But these ethics questions are not like, oh, what is this? Like near miss? Is it a mistake? Like, it's not those questions. It's like you have to know more about how to like interpersonally handle like mistakes in the medical setting. And also like brain death was a big thing. I had like 6 brain death questions. And like, so yeah, you gotta know brain death. And I don't
I remember one of our friends said this, and that actually helped me. When she said that, this actually helped me. She was like, there's a lot of snitching on this exam. And I was just like, oh, yeah. When I was with the questions, I was like, yeah, that's
report.
Literally, it's like if you see an option to tell a supervisor, to tell like the ethics like director, that's what you're doing. That's the answer. Yeah. And then the brain death questions, that just like unlocked something for me from my test day. I was like, why are we talking about this so much?
Yeah, so for the person who asked about the systems that were most common, I would say my test had a good mix, but it was very IM heavy, mine, and like cardiovascular, nephro, and GI were heavily tested on my exam. And infectious disease. I had a lot of like infectious disease stuff. And don't underestimate the psych questions, because I thought I was all that and a bag of chips with psych, because psych is my jam. And I neglected it while I was studying. And literally every psych question, I felt like, oh my gosh, like, oh my gosh. And on my score report, that was reflected in the psych and behavioral section. So don't sleep on it. Please don't sleep on it. Know your drugs, know the adverse effects, know like what drugs can look like a psychiatric disorder, like, yeah.
I have 2 questions.
Mm-hmm.
So my first question is, well, congratulations on everyone on your step 2. Yep. So my question is, the shelf exams, when you were preparing for your shelf exams, like the scores that you had gotten, could you tell me like the range that your scores were in and how well it prepped you for step 2 as well? I know that we discussed like resources and study habits, but I know like shelf exams are supposed to help us as well, but like what's the average range of your percentage? And then did it translate over to your step 2?
I could take that. So I say my shelf exams really helped me for step 2, i.e. why I didn't only had to study for 3 weeks. So for my shelf exams, I always ranged in between the 80s to 90s somewhere. And what I did was really just listen to Divine the entire time. So when I went into IM, I started press and play on Divine IM from the beginning, and made sure I did all of the UWorld questions in the IM section before my shelf. And that helped me out tremendously. Now you're going to lose the information because nothing is going to stay with you because of the volume. But what it helps is that when you get to your dedicated, it's not new. It's just like, oh yeah. If you're getting to dedicated and there's systems that are totally new, we're in trouble. But if you're getting into dedicated and you're like, oh yeah, I forgot that, you're good because that's like an additional pass so that when you see it on exam, you'll remember it.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. Because I believe what I was told is I need to score a 240. So I just needed to know like what I should be getting on my shelf exams. But that did help a lot.
Yeah, so I agree with everything Kai said. If you're trying to score in 240s land, that's where I was. I was scoring, with the exception of one, I was scoring between mid 70s to high 80s on my my shelf exams. I would say, like Kai said, from day one, like there's no, and I realized that after my first shelf exam, when you go into your rotations, there's no like, oh, I'm gonna start studying maybe the second week, no, like start studying from day one, whether that's what he said, like he's listening to a podcast. I was in the like firecracker era, so I was like firecracker was my jam. I loved it so much, and I was on it from day one, and I was also like doing full UWorld blocks from day one. So just make sure that once you start studying from day one, I think you'll be fine. That's all it really entails.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is I'm interested in 2 specialties, and Charnice, I think you're interested or applying to that one, psych.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But the 2 specialties I want to apply to, I think they require like 2 different scores, but this is just like for personal reasons, but I just want to know why you chose psych, because I'm kind of caught between the 2 and I just don't know which one to go with, and I just wanted to know what your reason is for choosing psych.
Okay, I can get into my polished interview answer. No, but just to keep it brief, I realized early on that I thought I wanted to do medicine, like a medical based specialty, and I realized early on that that's just not for me. I'm more interested in people. I'm more interested in like the qualitative aspect that is psychiatry. There's no like picture or blood level or lab that's gonna like clue you in on like what is going on with your patient. You have to actually listen. You have to actually like people. You have to actually observe. And like psychiatry has little elements of like, a little drama, a little like, oh, this is juicy. So that's why I ended up going with psych. So I think that if you're in the right specialty, if you can read about that every single day and still feel excited about it, if you can like always be attending a psychiatry lecture, always be reading about a new psych medication, new psych innovation, you can like sit down in a million forensic psychiatry lectures and still feel like, wow, like this is so interesting, then that's the field for you. And same goes for like whatever field you choose.
Okay, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on that. You'll know you're choosing the right thing when anything that anyone could possibly say about it to dissuade you or to be like, oh, couldn't be me, I could never do that. Like you're just like, okay, so then don't. Like I'll do it. I want to do it. Because everyone's always like, oh, lifestyle for OB. oh, like birth is kind of yucky though, right? Like, oh, you like the sight of blood? I do. I do. So, I'm like, it's not, if it's not for you, it's not for you. And if it is, no one can make you stray from it.
Nikisha, what's the other specialty that you're interested in?
Radiology.
Wow,
All of you did that
very
reaction.
Psychiatry,
Yeah.
like I really love people, and radiology is like, get away from me.
I don't know. It's like, I don't know. I find both of them interesting to read, and I know one is like more, interactive with people, and the other one is, less interactive, but
Mhm.
I don't know. I like them both, and I know there's like a new field. It's kind of new, but they have psychoradiology, but I don't, that's gonna be a while till it becomes like a full fellowship, but I know I'm kind of caught between the two. I don't know which one to go with, so.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll figure it out. My advice to you would be, in terms of step 2, just because that's the topic of the day, I would say don't focus on like what score you need to have for what specialty. Shoot for the stars, and you go from there, and then your options will be open.
Okay. I'll go in with that mindset. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amari. I'm a third year, just starting out in California. And my question to you guys is, did anyone here, did you guys all go straight into like fourth year electives and also like dedicated, or did any of you take like some time off or a gap year? Because after I finish my third year, which will be next August, I literally have a short window, like literally in that time would be my dedicated if I, were to apply, because, my timeline kind of ran out. So I had to start clinical. So I have not taken step 1, and then I'll have to take step 2. So like, I mean, I know there's some crossover between step 1 and step 2, but, I'm just wondering if anyone has any like advice on that, or like, I don't know.
So I didn't take a gap like year, but I did use some of my bridge time, and I think Kai mentioned using some of his bridge time as well. I took off May and June after I finished third year. If I could have taken July, I would have. I had, fortunately, the first elective that I started out with in July was pretty light in terms of having to go in, because it was surgery, but he only operated like 2 days a week. So I still had a lot of time to study ahead of my exam, even with that. But as far as you said, you still have to take step 1.
Yes. So yeah, SU did a lot of new changes recently where they added like a pre-step exam called CBSCE, and we have to take that first
I heard of
before
that.
we take, step 1. So, they give you only a certain amount of attempts, and then they either shunt you off to clinicals, or, you keep trying. But unfortunately, my timeline ran out before I got ample amount of tries. So I'll have that. And then unfortunately, I'll have to do remediation for an exam after. So I know it's just a short time period, like ending August. And then if I wanted to even apply, like September, like that, I don't know, it's kind of crazy.
Oh,
Ari,
so
you can email me. I know someone who also their timeline was running out, and then they had to like go straight into clinicals. They took step 2 first, and then they took step 1 4 weeks after, and they're applying the cycle. So I can get you in contact with them if you can email me, or like message me on Instagram. Then they would probably be able to help you more.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Okay. So I see a question. from Kevin on the chat. He's asking, how do you go about letters of recommendation for ERAS? So in my case, I always try to either like within the first week, if I knew this is a rotation I wanted to get a letter of recommendation from, within that first week, just let the attending, whatever attending I was working with, that like if they would be willing to write me a letter of recommendation, just so they would know to keep watching for me and watching my growth and see how kept doing during the rotation. But I know some people said like ask from day one, but I feel like from day one was a little bit too aggressive, in my opinion. So I would just like let them to get to know me a little bit better. And then within the like end of the first week, beginning of the second week, ask them like, would they be willing to write me a letter of recommendation? If that was a specialty that I was aiming for.
Yeah, I agree. I would say that during my third year is when I really was like, okay, let me like try to rack up my letters. So and I got like a few, like I got 2 from my electives, but you just go into your third year like putting your best foot forward and saying like, okay, I'm gonna go hard on this rotation. They're gonna see that I'm a great student. And then like for me, I used to ask like at the end, like I used to just like make sure that I made a good impression, and then at the end I would ask, and then you follow up throughout fourth year. You follow up like, oh, just an update, da 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 da, and then you follow up again like before you start applying. But yeah, I think once you can like walk the walk, then you can just easily talk to people and be like, oh yeah, I was wondering if you could like, and they'll be like, of course. So yeah, that's how I go about it. The link, hold on. Oh yeah, we'll post it on the YouTube. And if you follow us on Facebook, it's just IMGs Connect. We have a Facebook group, and then on Instagram, it's just IMGs Connect as well. And then if you're not already on our mailing list, you can drop your email in the chat and we'll add you to the email list. We try to send out a newsletter when we can. We're obviously very busy now, but we're trying. I know this was a lot, and I know you have to tackle one thing at a time. Like this exam is like important, and then you could go on to like application stuff. But if you have questions about applications as well, we can answer them like in the last 10 minutes, or any other questions that come up for you guys.
Hi y'all. I'm Hadia. I'm a third year from Ross. I am coming offline because first of all, I want to thank y'all for this session tonight. It's been really informative. I recall someone mentioning offline MB&B forms, so I put my email in the chat because I would like to have access to those if you don't mind.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
What I'll do, I told somebody else, I'll like add them to a Google Drive and send them out to whoever wants them. And you can reach out to us anytime.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, well, if nobody has any more questions.
I just wanted to say hi to Jessica and Kai. I'm so excited to see them again. They were my AP mentors. That's just why.
Oh my gosh! That is amazing.
Very happy to hear.
I'm so glad that they're doing good.
Aren't you proud of your mentors?
Yes, I'm so proud
Kevin.
of them. Hi, Kai. I'm just so proud of you guys. I wish I could get that too.
You
You'll
got
be
this,
here, sis.
boss.
Yeah, you'll be
Thank
here
you.
in like you'll blink your eyes. You'll be like, oh my God, I'm applying for residency.
It
Is this
happens.
real?
It happens so fast. Seriously, it happens so fast.
Finger crossed.
It will.
And like Kai
Well,
was
thank you, guys.
saying, like I was one of those people because I waited till so applications were due on my birthday, September 25th. I took my test on September 10th. The test takes 2 weeks on the Wednesday to come back. So it came back on my birthday, on the day we had to submit. And do you know that I was still working on my personal statement the morning of my birthday after I got my score? I was like, for the longest time, I was like, okay, this is my final draft. This is my final draft. And then I didn't submit until like noon that day.
Yeah, okay.
I did it. I don't know how, but
I'm telling you, that's my word of advice. Like, be prepared for that application. It's a beast. And it's not that it's long. What makes the application difficult is that they're very smart. Like, they make sure that they only give you enough characters to get the point across. So when I say this is all about efficiency, you have to be efficient with your words. Like, they're asking you a question, you got 250 characters to convince them. That's it. Like, I'm not saying words, key. It'll be like 250 characters, not words, okay? So there's a difference. So it makes it very hard. You have to think about exactly what you want to say.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
All right.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for coming, and we hope to see you next time.
Yeah, thanks for being here, everyone. We'll be sure to let you know when the next webinar comes out.
Thank you.
Thank you.